I bring you greetings from Sierra Leone, from fellow co-authors of this guide, some of whom are already on the call, and from the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone. So I'll be going through the development of the Indigenous Guide to the Common Birds of Sierra Leone, a project we started sometime in 2021 and got it completed earlier this year. So the talk outline will be going through the guide development methodology. We'll also be looking at the fieldwork, project outputs, the guidebook panel, the abstracts. We'll go through the guide briefly for anyone who may not have been able to see the guide, to have a look at what it looks like inside. We'll also look at the awareness raising and education campaign, some of the challenges we were faced whilst developing this book, the lessons we learned, and the impact of the guide and acknowledgements. So the rationale for developing this guide, the Indigenous Language Guide to the Common Birds of Sierra Leone, was really to promote interest in birds and to educate the public. So conservation is very important, as we all know, but bird conservation in particular has not received as much attention as it should have. And so as bird enthusiasts, we thought it fit that if there is a tool that we can develop that would be attractive for use by anybody in the public, that would help to increase interest in bird conservation. We also wanted to contribute to Sierra Leone's cultural and environmental heritage, and we also hoped that it would hopefully enhance conservation. So the development of the guide, the methodology really was not too complicated. We had to agree on the content and layout of the guide. We looked at the selection of the common species, and this was an interesting part of the whole project, as it's obviously very difficult to decide on which are the most common species depending on where you are located and some of the birds you have been able to see. But the team also went through some of the common birds which have been recorded in the BirdLassa app to help to determine which were the most common birds recorded. And that led us to deciding on the 60 most common birds in Sierra Leone. We also intended to do illustrations of the common species. This did not go quite as planned, but we ended up having quite a good alternative, as we will see later on in the presentation. And the fieldwork, which made up the most important aspect of this project, which meant we had to go out and do interviews with local communities. We had to go to different areas of the country, the north, south, east, and west, all over the country, and we had to engage local communities to get them to speak to us on what are some of the common names, what are some of their connections, how well they're aware of local birds, and all the good stuff. So we went through that field work, which took quite a bit of time, as is expected. And then with the information we got from the fieldwork, we reviewed, we edited, and we finalized the draft text. And we got quite a good we got a good help from the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, who assisted in doing this reviewing process, and also the publishers. And then we went on to printing and publishing of the text. So during the field work, as mentioned before, this is just an example of what the questionnaire looked like. So as you can see clearly, we had to know what the person's name was and all their personal details. And then we went on to find out their ethnic group, because we have different ethnic groups across Sierra Leone. And whilst presenting later, you'll see that we decided on 3 particular ethnic group languages. And so we had to know the ethnic group the person was from, and then what they called the particular bird in their own language. So we ended up at the end of the field work determining that Mende, Timni, and Creole, which had they had more names for the birds than some of the other ethnic groups. We determined that we will use those 3 languages to be represented in the guide. So this is just an example for people who could write. So we engaged different levels of people. We engaged some of the like Gola, the Gola staff, the people at Gola. We engaged some other community members like chiefs and everybody basically. And we also engaged some field staff, and we also engaged even people who are not literate. So what we did for that aspect was to show them, we had, as you can see on this picture, you can see that there is a pamphlet on the table. So we had a picture of the different birds, the 60 species, and we had the community participants identify whether they knew the birds and also tell us the name that they called those birds in their native languages. And as you can see here, this is us out on some field work. So the project outputs for this project was to develop this Indigenous guide, definitely. And it was also to raise awareness and to also bring education. So we did that in a campaign, and this is ongoing, and it's being done by the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone. A poster was also developed, and this is awaiting printing. As you can see here, this is a poster of some of the birds that are represented in the guide. So you have their name, you have the local language, you have the scientific name, and of course you have the English name and what it looks like. And we also had a guidebook panel, and this is the panel that actually spearheaded the development of this book. And a project report was developed at the end of the project, and this was submitted to the African Bird Club, who sponsored the development of this guide. So for anyone who may not have seen the book, this is exactly what the cover page looks like. It has the name, The Common Birds of Sierra Leone, an Indigenous Language Guide. And you have the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone, who was the implementing partner, represented here on the cover page. And this is our national flag colors, the green, white, and blue. And of course, we have the common bulbul, which is one of the most common birds across Sierra Leone. The guidebook panel consisted of myself, Andrea Hoffner, and also Papani Baisise, who is also a project manager at Conservation Society Sierra Leone. Momo Baisise is also a member. He's a bird expert and also the ABC representative of Sierra Leone and a co-author. And Dr. Hazel Shokelu Thompson, who was the lead author for this book and who also helped coach us through the development of this book. So going through the guide briefly, the guide describes 60 common species in Sierra Leone. You have high resolution colors of all the different types of birds, which were provided by photographers like Tasso Leventis, Joseph Afrifa, and David Monticelli. And we also had several others which we were given permission to that were online pictures. The bird names are given in one or more of the main indigenous languages in Sierra Leone, which are Mende, Timni, and Creole. And there are also notes on where each species is likely to be seen, its behavior, importance, and cultural connections to Sierra Leoneans. The introduction also provides information on bird habitats in Sierra Leone, tips on bird watching, and how to use the guide effectively. We're looking at the table of contents. This is what the guide essentially covers in essence. So you have the general introduction, you have the key facts to Sierra Leone as a whole, you have a guide on how this guide can be used, the places to see common birds, how to look for birds, list of common birds in this book. We have the species accounts, which makes up the major parts of the book. And we also have useful contacts and information in case someone is coming in maybe as a tourist or as an expert, and you need to have connections to some of the organizations working in the environment in Sierra Leone. We also have these connections, and we have our resources, and we also have a space about the authors and the index of English bird names. So within the book, this is what the book actually looks like on the inside, where you have the panel on the birds. So this is just an example on the cattle egret. You can see the Mende name, you can see the Timney name, you can see the Creole name and its scientific name. There's a clear picture of it within, and you have a description of this bird, where it can be found and what it looks like. This is where it can be found. This is something, what you need to know about the cow angel, or otherwise known in the English language as the cattle egret. This is something you may need to know. We have some cultural anecdotes which are included, and I'll get to that a little later. And you also have some confusion species, because the cattle egret, as some of us birders know, can be mistaken for a little egret, for example. So some of these birds, which may be easily confused, are also clearly identified to be similar to other birds, and the other birds are also identified within the book. So let's look at some of the indigenous names of the common birds in Sierra Leone. So we have, for example, the red-billed firefinch, also known as the Senegal firefinch. In Mende, it is called Hay. In Temne, it's called Yente, and it has some other names. And in Creole, it's called Camarabod. I may not be doing justice to the pronunciation of some of the other languages, because they're not my native language. But we also have a section within the guide which describes how you can pronounce these names properly. So you also have the scientific name, and you have the African green pigeon. It's called Tapoe in Mende. It's also called pigeon, just pigeon in Creole, and you have its scientific name. And the Senegal kukal in Mende is called Jebetwitwi. In Timne, it's called Angrunu, and in Creole, it's a clockbird or timebird. The red-vented malimbe is called Dogbobakwi. But as you can see here, there's no known Timni or Creole name. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, but as far as our field work went, we did not receive any names in Timni or Creole for the red-vented malimbe. And this also occurs for several other birds within the guide. The guide also went out to identify some threatened species. So in addition to highlighting the most common birds, the team took it up to also raise awareness about some birds that are threatened within Sierra Leone. So in the process of learning about birds, the public can also be made aware about some of these species, such as the hooded vulture, which is known as Yuba in Creole. You also have the Timini parrot, which is Polly, and the white-necked Picattatis, which does not have a name in Creole, which is understandable, and I'll explain that a little later. And within Sierra Leone also, during the field work, what we found out was that the local community is well aware about birds and their importance. They also have a stronger cultural connection to some of these birds. And we also received some of the cultural anecdotes that some of these communities have for these birds. This just comes to show that they are, in fact, aware of their environment and of the birds around them. So you'll see that for owls, for example, in Sierra Leone, people usually think that it brings bad luck. So most times people don't want them around them. People will try to drive them off to get them away from them. And they will usually do this with lots of loud noises and shouts, etc. People don't want owls around them. They usually think it has to do something with black magic. For the hooded vultures, in some parts of Sierra Leone, we found out that they explain that vulture parts are sold for traditional medicine. Also, quite interestingly, they're also sometimes bought and cooked and passed off as chicken for eating, unfortunately. These illegal activities have caused the number of birds, these hooded vultures, and some others to reduce in numbers drastically. For the Senegal kukal in Sierra Leone, it is believed that their feathers put in houses provide some form of protection from witchcraft. For the little swift, literally, it is called the crazy bird or bird in Creole because of the way it flies in different directions when it's in flight and whilst feeding on insects. The cattle egret is said to be called the cow angel, which sounds very much like the English translation cow angel, meaning it usually stays around the cattle, feeding on insects that disturb the animals. And in some areas of Sierra Leone, it is believed that they are spirits inhabiting the earth and they are not seen by the cattle themselves. For the woodland kingfisher, in some parts in Sierra Leone, the bills of the kingfisher are attached to ropes and they are hung around the necks of small children who are finding it difficult to talk. And it is believed that for some reason, when this is done, when the beaks are hung around their neck, it will aid the children to talk fast. As bad as we all know how noisy the woodland kingfisher can be. So it kind of makes sense to think that this would have something to do with children speaking as well. So for the awareness raising and education campaign that was also done alongside the development of this guide, publicity articles in various CSSL media outlets, including the CSSL website and CSSL Facebook page, was done. The poster, which I earlier shared, was also derived from this book, and this featured 10 of the most common birds in this guide. The guide is distributed free to bird club members and activists, to school nature clubs, forest monitors, and other CSSL advocacy targets. And this is to help to increase awareness because we are also very much aware that not everyone might be able to make a purchase, even though it is at a very affordable price. But we also want to go out to do our own bit in terms of contributing to the promotion of bird conservation. The guide is also made available for sale to the public and to relevant key institutions. And all the sales from these proceeds are made to print more books to make more free distribution. So some of the challenges that we faced whilst developing this book, there were a few, and the first one was getting poor quality of accurate bird drawings. So we didn't foresee this. We thought it would be quite easy to get an artist to do drawings of the birds, but unfortunately, this didn't come out as well as we had anticipated. So we had to have an alternative plan, which was to get actual pictures, images taken by environmental photographers, and also some online pictures that we received permission to use within the guide. In addition, sourcing high-resolution bird photographs and its ensuing implications on funds was also a bit of a setback because getting the right photographs to use within the guide and having it at a resolution that would make it easily identifiable when printed was an issue. And this was something that was not already anticipated. So there were no funds, in fact, to source these photographs for the guide. So it had some implications on the funds, but we were lucky enough to have co-funding from the lead author, Dr. Hazel Thompson, who came in with a bit of the funds towards the total project funding, and we were able to complete the project successfully. In addition to some of the other challenges that we got, one of the main issues that we also had out in the field was having different species having the same name in different parts of the country. So going to the north, sometimes you'd have one name for a bird, and you go to the west, which is in Freetown, you'd have the same name for a different bird. But the issue was it was also the same vice versa. You'll also have the same bird having different names. For example, we found out that all doves and all pigeons were called pigeons. They're all called pigeons, whether they were red-eyed doves, whether they were feral pigeons, as long as they had the look of a pigeon or dove, they were called pigeons across the country. And in some areas, we found out that the names were also different. So we had to use our discretion. And we also looked at the frequency of the participants' responses to determine the names that we would be able to settle for to use within the guide. The lessons learned whilst implementing this project included that fieldwork provided the team with an opportunity to understand the connection between people and their environment. So like I mentioned a little earlier, we were pleasantly surprised to find that a lot of these communities already have some connection with birds and their environment. They are well aware, but they are not quite educated on the impact of their activities on these birds themselves. So this was a pleasant discovery. It was also quite good for the team to network with lay experts. And some of these lay experts in the field were the ones who provided us with the cultural anecdotes that I made mention of a little earlier on. Collaborating with orthographic specialists also assisted us in completing the guide in terms of doing proper spellings of the local names, because like I mentioned before, we are all not au fait with the spellings or even the speech of all the local languages. So the orthographic specialists came in to correct some of the spellings we already had, to spell them properly, and to help us to make quite a good standard document that can be produced as this guide. The indigenous name identification was also quite a fun aspect of this project. Looking at some of the Creole names and also speaking Creole myself, some of these names were quite interesting. For instance, the Camarabod, which is also the red-billed firefinch. Camara is one of the most common names in Sierra Leone. And the red-billed firefinch is also quite common across the city, particularly, and in areas where you have people. So naming the finch, the Camarabod, made quite a lot of sense. And this was also the case for several other birds that we found out their indigenous names. We also developed a sales and distribution model in terms of how we can effectively get the bird guide to increase bird conservation across the country. So the sales of the guide was determined to not be very expensive. It was determined that the cost should be quite affordable for anyone to be able to purchase. And in addition to that, we also developed the model in terms of ensuring that what is being sold goes back into printing more books, and those books are also used for more awareness raising and more distribution to more people across the country. The impact of the guide. So the guide has served as an affordable tool to generate interest in birds across Sierra Leoneans. So it came at a time when the Western Area Peninsula National Park Bird Club was also starting off and also engaging in bird activities. So some of the distribution, as can be seen in this picture, was done for some of the bird club members. So we had a few of them who won bird competitions, and their prize was the Indigenous guide, which will further help them to increase their knowledge of the different birds that we have in Sierra Leone. It was also ensured that the bird guide was distributed to schools as well. So you will see here that this guide was also given to one of the school nature clubs at the American Montessori Leadership Academy, and several other schools are also in line waiting to receive their own copies to contribute towards their school nature club activities. Bird Lassa is also an app that we use in Sierra Leone that contributes to local citizen science. And this is one of our citizen scientists who is also a member of the WAP-NP Bird Club. And he is also utilizing, as you can see, he's making use of the book here to identify birds whilst out on the field. And this man is also a forest monitor located at Mamunta Mayoso, one of the protected areas in Sierra Leone. And he also received his free copy from Dr. Hazel Thompson. The implementation of this project could not have been successful without the input and support from several people. So we are acknowledging Dr. Sheku Kamara and the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone for their admin support. We acknowledge the African Bird Club for providing the bulk of the funding support to successfully develop this guide. Dr. Hazel Shokoli Thompson also provided co-funding, which amounted to 25% of the final expenditure, and we are very grateful to him for that. And we also had several nature photographers who provided the use of their work, and also those online who granted licensed use of their work for us to be able to use it within the guide. Joseph John Bokari helped us with the maps that are within the guide, and Catherine Prinzing also supported us with creativity. The Sierra Leone Writers Series was responsible for publishing the book and also helped with a bit of reviewing and editing. And all the ethnographers, lay experts, and reviewers provided invaluable technical support. The authors, on behalf of all the authors, myself, Dr. Shokelu Thompson, who is here with us, Momo Baisise and Papani Baisise, we are all very grateful to our families for many years of support and encouragement, and for also being our support whilst traveling and whilst being so engaged in ensuring that this guide is developed and published and sent out to the public successfully. I want to thank you on behalf of the Guidebook Panel, the Conservation Society of Sierra Leone. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for this insightful presentation. I am very sure that most of us, or all of us on the call, have learned something from this presentation, from the various steps they took as a team to work it out to the final book that any citizen scientist or a forester or just a nature enthusiast in Sierra Leone can actually take it out into the field and use it to identify birds. Is a huge thing that actually you and your team have done with the guide. So well done, and thank you so much for taking out from your experience to actually share with us here as a project too. I'm sure we too will learn because we don't have a guide, yeah, still. So probably we'll borrow from your experience to develop ours as well. So thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank
And
you
for
for having
now,
me.
you're welcome. For all that are on the call, please, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and ask Andrea directly, or you can drop it in the chat and then we can read it out. Or if anyone from the team with Andrea want to add something more, please, you can go ahead as well. Thank you so much. And if nobody have a question for now, I will want to start. So the guide has 60 common birds of Sierra Leone. My first question is, how many bird species do you have in Sierra Leone? And how representative of all the birds in Sierra Leone are these 60 bird species that you and your team decided to work with in the bird guide? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Nanchin. So we have over 600 species of birds in Sierra Leone, and we are on a journey to try to determine the exact number. So we're working with the Sierra Leone Bird Atlas Project, much like the Nigerian Bird Atlas Project. And we are hoping to have more citizen scientists on board who can contribute towards the results of those projects. So yes, and in terms of representation, like I mentioned, we were very careful to ensure that we went to all the four the four provinces in Sierra Leone. So Sierra Leone is divided into the northern province, the eastern province, the southern, and the western area. So we were sure to take representation from all the different areas. And also the team also made sure that we went through the results of previous bird atlas records, and we looked through and we were also able to see which ones were the most common birds that were being recorded by our citizen scientists. And that also largely helped us to determine on the 60 birds that would be represented.
Thank you so much for that. And anyone with a question? Let me check the chat so that I don't miss anything out. Yeah, so Elisha just saying great presentation. So thank you, Elisha. And then I think I have another question because I was trying to write down some things while you were giving the presentation. Uh-huh. Oh. Pardon me, please. But if anyone, okay, Hazel has his hand up. Yeah, Dr. Hazel, you can go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Nanchin. And thank you very much as well, Andrea. A great presentation. My question is around the younger generation, of which I consider you a member, forgive me, as to how you see this book helping to engage young people in ornithology, including the club or the nature club you started as well. I'm just interested in how engagement with the younger generation can be increased. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. I think one of the interesting things about this guide, not because we co-authored the guide, but because I think it was a good idea to make it very simple. So it is, in fact, quite attractive to the younger generation, and it's also quite attractive to kids themselves. So I noticed that for Nature Club members, for example, those within the WAP NP Bird Club, they found it very convenient to use this Indigenous guide, because for one, it's easy to see the birds just up front. You have one bird on one page, so you see the bird clearly, and you can be able to look at it and can be able to correspond with what you're seeing on the field. And you also have the names in the local languages, which also resonates with you. So for instance, if you see a parrot and maybe you don't know what it's called, we all know the parrot is the poly in Creole, so it's easy to identify with it as well. So I feel it's very easy to use. I feel that because it's also being distributed to nature clubs, it's accessible easily for everyone to be able to see, to use it, and to be able to identify with the nature around them and also the birds around them. And it was also used quite recently during the launching of the 100 Acre Woods Kids Nature Club. It was used by the kids, and they found it very interesting to flip through, look at the pictures, and it was also quite interesting to call the indigenous names. So it's also quite fun for the children as well. And I think that's a good thing in terms of engaging them and making them aware of the birds that we're trying to conserve. So that's my own take.
Thanks, Andrea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrea. And yeah, now I just found the question that I wrote down, and actually is almost close to what Dr. Hazel just asked you, because it's about the guide and the bed clubs. You know, something with the Nigerian bed clubs is that we try to make sure that we engage the people and we make it fun and interesting for them to keep coming back. In your own case, in Sierra Leone is a huge thing that your team has already done. You know, you like try to bring out the guide and link it somehow to the people, like you have just rightly said, because you open it and then you see the name in your local language. I know that is something that maybe we'll really have to think about it in Nigeria because of the many, many languages we have here. But then at the bed club level, does the bird guide really like impact membership? From the start of the clubs, or this when you started actually engaging the club members with the bird guide, does it like really influence the number of people coming? You know, and for the fact that it's for free.
Right, exactly. And we also know that bird guides are a bit pricey and they're not readily available in Sierra Leone, unfortunately. So the WAP NP Bird Club actually started off with one field guide per club, because there are several other bird clubs across the country. So each club had one field guide. That was a very good start, but we all know it's quite difficult having 5 or 6 people out birding and you have only one guide. So it has to be like swapped, you know, every now and then, which may not have been as effective. But with the this bird guide being distributed freely, it has already been given to 3 members of the WAP NP Bird Club. So we have 3 members already in use. And I noticed that whilst going out, it's so easy for them to look through and identify what they're seeing. It's not as strenuous anymore to be sharing. So yes, we do have more members coming in. We do have several new members also who are just from college, who have also won a copy. So I think that's a good start. That's a good start. At the end of the day, the goal is to get them out a bird guide to help me learn the different birds when I go out on the field. So I feel that's quite good. And yes, we have quite a good number now within the WAP-NP, and I'm hoping that with the sales that we have done and more copies that are expected to be done, we can have more copies for members and we can have more people on board to contribute towards citizen science in Sierra Leone.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And then there's a question for you in the chat from Elisha. If you can see it, you can read it. You are muted, Andrea.
I am sorry. I just need to learn from your challenges. Did you experience reservations from the ethnic groups selected while seeking for names of birds? And also, how did you manage to get these local people to give you information? Okay, that's a good question. Actually, no, we didn't get reservations per se from local communities. Um, I think maybe because it was on bird conservation, maybe because it wasn't something, may I say, political or something very, very serious that they might not want to release information about. Maybe they would have been hesitant. But this is something they actually found fun. Some of them were interested to know, why do you want to know about birds? Yes, we have these birds. Some of them were saying things like, I could bring you the birds if you want. And we had to tell them, no, 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 we don't want the birds. We just want to know their names. We want to know whether they're existing here. We want to know some of your connections with these birds. They were quite open in terms of relating with us. That was not a problem at all. And it was really engagement. So our first port of call usually is to visit a local head. We usually go to a local head depending on the community we're going to. It's traditional that you have to pay respect to the head in a community. And from there, usually, if the head endorses you and gives you his blessings to proceed into his community, you don't have any problems with the community members. They're usually easier to deal with in that regard. And like I mentioned, this was something quite interesting for them. This was something they all wanted to contribute towards. So it was quite easy for us, really, I would say. Maybe it's because yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, Andrea. Hope
You're
you have
welcome.
learned from this feedback, Mr. Elisha. So, I don't know. I don't think there is more of a questions in the chat, and if that will be it, I would really want to thank everyone on today's call for joining. I want to believe that we have all learned from this presentation, and we will take it forward to apply it, because this is a case of a bird guide, but you can actually apply this experience in developing other guide as well, not only bird guides. And I like the feedback that you've just given, Elisha. The thing is, it's more of an interaction with the people. It's just what you have that we are interested in knowing. So there is nothing to like scare them away, but try to work with them together. Sometimes the mistakes that we do is to like go out there and try to make it look as if we know better. But the truth is that the people out there also know something and they have something to also offer. So the thing is that there is always a place to balance and we can always learn from each other. Going forward from that, I think conservation sure has a brighter future because we can't work without the people. So thank you so much, Andrea, for your time. Thank you, Dr. Hazel, for making this happen. And thank you, everyone on the call. I hope that when we call again, you will have the time to join us because we definitely learn something whenever we join in a call like this. So on this note, if there are no more questions, no more addition, I will want to say Abdul Malik, thank you so much. And the thing is, the recorded version will be shared on the Nigerian Bird Atlas Facebook page. So you would do well also to find it over there on the Facebook group. So thank you so much, everyone, from joining. Special thanks again to Andrea. Nice to see you again.
Thank you
And
for having me. Great to see
yeah.
you too.